In a post-apocalyptic world where most human beings have been turned into zombies, Francis returns to the farm where he grew up with his wife and 2 children. To make sure his family is safe, the man decides to explore the whole house and walks around the rooms with a tool in his hand. When he enters the room, he finds the body of his father, who ended his life after being infected by the pathogen because he didn't want to turn into one of those monsters. After taking the man's gun and watch, Francis leaves the room shaken and finds his mother, who has been turned into a zombie and is now wandering around the house. When she tries to walk towards her son, the woman's body breaks in half. She then drags her torso with her arms to try and reach her prey, and Francis has to shoot her. That afternoon, the man digs a grave and buries his parents' bodies. Even though he is heartbroken, he decides to stay on the farm with his family, because he knows that this is the safest place for them to be, as it is far from any kind of civilization. What's more, thanks to the well, the family will have an unlimited supply of drinking water and will be able to grow food for their subsistence. While Iris tries to relieve the stress, Francis leaves Lucas with his mother and asks Josh, his eldest son, to accompany him to the warehouse to find out if there is anything useful inside. The man knows that Mr. Orley used to live there to help his father with the plantations, so he starts calling out to him. While walking around the site, Josh comes across the old man's body hanging from a rope and gets scared, but his father asks him to get the bunch of keys that are hanging from Orley's pants. Frightened, the young man approaches slowly and manages to grab the keys, but as he pulls them out, Josh ends up being knocked over by the body, which ends up falling on top of him. The teenager immediately rushes to get up, and Francis is disappointed by his son's cowardice. When her husband returns, Iris reveals that she has found a power generator inside a room that looks a lot like a cell. When he goes inside, Francis suffers an anxiety attack and his wife helps him to get out, as she realizes that he is not feeling well. During dinner, Josh tries to tune into the radio he found in the warehouse in order to get news about what's going on in the world, but he can't get a signal. Worried, Iris wonders what will happen to her family, because if nothing is done they won't have food for much longer. According to the latest news, the survivors should head north, but Francis believes that his family is safer on that farm, even after seeing what happened to his parents. At this point, Josh reveals that Alice and her family have gone to the mountains, but Francis says that the young man won't leave the farm to look for his girlfriend. That evening, after dinner, the young man tries to send a message to Alice, but he can't get a cell phone signal either. Meanwhile, Iris scolds her husband for the way he's been treating Josh lately and reminds him that he promised not to treat the young man badly. The next morning, Francis wakes up from a dark nightmare and hugs his wife. During his sleep, the man had flashes of memory of the attacks he experienced in that place, because when he was a child his father used to lock him in the basement as a form of punishment. The man also harbors resentment towards Iris, because the woman had an extramarital affair years ago and Josh is the fruit of that sin. The young man has no idea that he is a bastard, but he realizes that his father treats him differently from Lucas, his favorite son. That morning, Iris manages to convince her husband to leave the farm and head for the mountains. Along the way, Josh reveals that his uncle Diego has also advised his mother to go to the mountains and, on hearing this, Francis is furious. Minutes later, the family arrives at a bridge and comes across a fence. As it's getting dark, Francis suggests going home, but Iris gets out of the van and walks to the fence. While cutting the wires with her machete, the woman is surprised by the sudden appearance of a zombie soldier who walks slowly towards her. Seeing his wife in danger, Francis gets out of the vehicle and Iris runs towards him, as she is being chased. At this point, the man orders her to get down and shoots the monster in the head. Soon after, another zombie appears and Francis manages to eliminate it, but the noise of the shots attracts the attention of other monsters, who gather around the van to try and invade it. Seeing his children in danger, the man starts shooting to attract the attention of the zombies and is pursued while Iris flees with the children. When his ammunition runs out, Francis picks up a grenade he found next to the body of one of the soldiers and climbs into the cars in an attempt to escape the creatures. During the escape, the man hides behind a truck and throws the grenade to get rid of the zombies that are coming after him. After wiping out the entire horde in one fell swoop, Francis goes to meet his family and they all return to the farm, as they realize that the world outside is too dangerous. 2 weeks later, Francis returns to the bridge to pick up the van and discovers that it is still running. However, instead of using the vehicle to take the supplies home, he decides to drag everything to the farm and tells Iris that the van has stopped working so that she doesn't try to convince him to leave again. That afternoon, Francis fixes the generator and his house has electricity again. He is committed to doing everything in his power to convince his wife and children that staying on the farm is the best option. That day, the family can enjoy the air conditioning and good music. After dancing with his children, Francis turns on the TV to watch the recordings of his wedding day, but instead of joining him, Iris decides to go to her room. The next morning, the man talks to his wife and apologizes for all the harm he has caused his family over the past year. The truth is that Francis wants a new chance to rebuild his marriage and is willing to do whatever it takes to have a happy family again. Seeing her husband's willingness to put things right, Iris agrees to work with him to rebuild their relationship. While his wife and children gather in the kitchen for breakfast, Francis goes to the chicken coop to get some eggs and comes across a wild dog. When he tries to scare the animal away, he ends up being bitten and, after picking up the chicken he's eliminated, the dog leaves. Luckily, Iris is a nurse and manages to bandage her husband's hand. She then tries to persuade him to go to hospital because he needs a rabies vaccine, but Francis says he's fine. Just then, the couple heard Josh's cries and ran over to him. The young man was trying to get a radio signal and heard someone talking about a campsite. However, Francis doesn't pay any attention to what the young man says, as he is convinced that the best decision his family can make is to stay exactly where they are. That afternoon, Josh keeps saying that he heard something important on the radio and tries to convince his father to try and find those people. Furious at the young man's insistence, Francis says that before he thinks about going out exploring, Josh needs to learn how to defend himself. So the man decides to take him to the cane field and hands him a pistol so that he can practice target shooting. When she hears the shots, Iris is startled, so she goes after them and is annoyed to see her husband humiliating Josh because the young man can't hit the bottle. Annoyed, Francis starts shouting and the young man is so terrified that he starts crying and shoots several times until he finally hits his target. Minutes later, the family realizes that the noise of the gunshots has attracted a horde of zombies. At that moment, Francis takes Lucas on his lap and orders everyone to run back home, but they end up being chased by the monsters. After entering the house, the family reinforces the front door and hides on the balcony. It's getting dark when Francis decides to look out onto the balcony and panics when he sees all those monsters trying to break in. When the zombies manage to open the door, a vehicle approaches and the driver starts honking to attract them. At that moment, the monsters give up on entering the house and start chasing the car, which quickly drives away. The next morning, Francis goes out to check on the damage caused by the zombies and finds that the chicken coop has been destroyed. A few meters away from the farm, there is a stream where Diego parks his car to rest. When he finds out that it was his brother who saved his family the night before, Francis goes to find him and asks what he's doing there. At this point, Diego reveals that his wife and son have perished, so he decides to go back to the farm where he grew up to check on his parents, only to discover that they have also been infected. Realizing that Francis still holds a grudge for what happened between his brother and his wife in the past, Diego asks for forgiveness once again and tries to make peace with him. He then claims to know the way to the Delta camp where the survivors are sheltering, but Francis refuses his help and orders him to leave. Before leaving, Diego hands his brother a map and tells him that he can use it to get to the camp if he changes his mind. When his brother leaves, Francis realizes that he has left a coat behind and decides to take it to the farm to tell his wife that his brother has been devoured by zombies. That day, the man decides to reinforce the windows of his house with wooden planks to ensure that no further invasions take place. Meanwhile, Lucas follows some mosquitoes around the house in an attempt to eliminate them and ends up in the basement. When he gets there, the young man sees a zombie through the window and gets a fright, but his mother is there to comfort him and says that those creatures are getting weaker and weaker. In order to survive, the zombies need to feed on human flesh and, if they don't get any, over time they will slowly perish. When this happens, Iris believes it will be safe to leave. While walking through the cane field, Francis finds the zombie his son spotted through the window and removes its head with a machete. After getting blood on his clothes, the man takes the monster's head home and tells his wife that the creature attacked him. At the sight of the head, Josh and Lucas get scared and run back to the house. Then Iris calls her husband's attention because he's terrifying the children. At this point, the woman realizes that Francis's plan is to make them more and more afraid so that they don't think about leaving the farm, because the man is willing to do whatever it takes to keep his family under his thumb. Weeks later, when the end of the year arrives, Francis prepares a surprise for his wife and children. The man sets up a Christmas tree and decorates the house with Christmas decorations. When they see this surprise, the children get excited, but Iris doesn't react because she knows very well what her husband's intentions are. During dinner, Francis asks what gifts his children would like from Santa Claus, and Lucas replies that he would like a bicycle. However, Josh's answer surprises him, as the young man says that he would like to win the map that his father is hiding as a Christmas present. On hearing this, Iris is surprised and asks what the young man is talking about. At this point, Josh reveals that he saw a map in his father's room, but Francis denies what he's saying. He then makes his Christmas wish and tells his wife that he wants to increase their family. According to him, now that they're safe in that house, it's the perfect time to have another baby. But Iris says she won't put a child in a world that's been completely destroyed. At that moment, the woman takes the opportunity to reveal her greatest desire and says that she wants to leave that farm as soon as possible. Every day the family's stock of supplies dwindles and Iris says she has to go in search of more supplies because she can't live like this any longer. Upon hearing this, Francis decides to try a new strategy to blackmail his wife and tells his children that, before the zombies appeared, Iris was planning to run away from home and leave her family behind. When they receive this news, the boys are deeply disappointed and Iris tries to explain herself. In tears, the woman said she intended to tell Josh and Lucas that she was planning to leave and wouldn't leave without saying goodbye. Hearing this, Josh feels guilty, but Iris says that he and Lucas have done nothing wrong. The truth was that the woman was deeply unhappy with her marriage and could no longer bear to share the same roof with Francis. Her goal was to start a new life away from him, but she knew she didn't have enough money to ensure her children's survival, so she was planning to leave them with their father until she could get back on her feet. After telling the truth, Iris begs her husband to give her the map, but instead Francis decides to burn the paper. Seeing her only hope of escape being turned to ashes, the woman runs to try and stop it, but her husband manages to hold her back and the map is completely destroyed by the flames. Furious, Iris slaps Francis and goes to her room. In a single night, Francis managed to completely destroy his relationship with his wife and children. Not content with that, he has also destroyed the relationship between Iris and the children, as Josh and Lucas can no longer trust their mother. In an attempt to repair the damage, the woman decides to join the children to read them a story and enjoys every minute with them. Meanwhile, Francis is cutting cane and isolating himself to think about the next steps he will take to try to rebuild his family. At that moment, he hears a shot and returns home with a board and chain in his hands. His plan consists of blocking the door so that the monsters can't get in, but in doing so he will also prevent his family from leaving the house. When he realizes that he will become a prisoner, Josh decides to challenge his father's attitude and tries to convince him not to block the doors. At this point, Francis becomes paranoid that his family is hatching a plot and planning to escape without him. Furious, Josh realizes that it's not the zombies that are threatening that family, but his own father, who is trying to lock them in the house just like his father did to him. When Francis is compared to the man he hates the most, he becomes furious and attacks the young man. Immediately, Iris pulls her son away and, just then, the family hears a knock on the door. Then they hear the voice of a soldier who claims not to be infected, but Francis refuses to open the door. Desperate, Corcora reveals that he is wounded and begs for some water and food. Even so, Francis insists that he leave and threatens to shoot him. However, Josh feels moved and decides to open the door. Immediately, Iris helps the soldier tend to his wound and discovers that he came from Camp Delta. According to Corcora, his unit went to the city to look for supplies for the camp, but ended up being attacked. Luckily, the soldier managed to escape and was the only survivor left from his unit. At this point, Francis takes the opportunity to reinforce the idea that there are still many zombies on the loose, but Corcora says that from there to the Delta there are hardly any infected, as most of them perished because they couldn't feed themselves. The young man says that the few zombies that remain are clustered in the cities, where there is more noise and external stimuli, but the camp is safe. When asked how he managed to survive, Corcora reveals that it was thanks to a man who met him halfway. This guy told him to run in that direction until he found the farm, but he ended up being attacked by the zombies. Upon hearing this, Iris discovers that her husband lied about Diego's perishment and Francis decides to lock the soldier in the basement. In the early hours of the morning, Josh goes to his room and wakes up his mother to say goodbye, as he plans to meet Diego to ask for help. Even though he knows that his uncle has been attacked and may not have survived, the young man is determined to try and find him, as he can no longer stand living with his father. Before leaving, Josh reveals the secret that his mother has kept from him all these years. He knows that Francis isn't his real father and that's why he treats him with such hostility. At dawn, when he arrives in the kitchen, Francis sees Iris and Lucas sitting at the table having breakfast with Corcora and asks where Josh is. When he finds out that the young man has left, Francis completely loses his mind and eliminates the soldier with a hammer to the head for no reason. Terrified, Iris gets up and uses her body as a shield to protect Lucas. After being hit by her husband, the woman faints and wakes up in the basement next to her son. Even during the day, the place is completely dark, because Francis has closed all the windows with wooden boards, so that the sunlight no longer enters the room. After imprisoning his wife and son in the same cell where his father kept him as a child, Francis sits down next to Corker's body to eat his breakfast. Looking out of the window, he spots the wild dog that attacked him months ago and decides to eliminate it. The man then cooks the animal's meat and offers it to his wife and son to eat, but even though they are hungry, they refuse. Furious, Francis drops the tray on the floor and Iris takes advantage of the moment when her husband is distracted to hide the knife he was using to cut the meat. The woman then tries to convince him to let them go and promises that she will never leave him. Although he very much wants to believe his wife's words, Francis knows she isn't telling the truth and leaves after picking up the knife. As soon as the man closes the door, Iris uses a crowbar to try to remove the wooden slats from the window and ends up taking a tumble. At that moment, she faints and, minutes later, is woken up by her son. Together, they come up with an escape plan and Lucas starts screaming. Concerned, Francis rushes down to the basement to find out what's going on and, when he bends down to talk to the young boy, the man is attacked. After driving a metal object into her husband's back, Iris flees with her son and locks him in the basement. Immediately, Francis starts shooting at his wife, but he can't hit her and, at that moment, he is haunted by terrible memories of what he experienced in that place. Meanwhile, Iris runs to get some supplies before fleeing with her son and also takes a machete to protect herself. After opening the padlocks and removing the chains, the woman promises her son that they will find Josh and they both run out of the house. However, as soon as she opens the door, she runs into Diego, who has been contaminated and turned into a zombie. Terrified, the woman returns home with her son, but the monster manages to break into the house and grabs Iris' feet as she climbs the stairs. Hearing his wife's screams, Francis realizes that she is in danger and starts kicking in the door. Meanwhile, the woman uses the bag of supplies to stop Diego from biting her and Lucas attacks his uncle with the flashlight. After being hit, the zombie lets go of its prey and goes after Lucas, so Iris gets up and throws the bag in the monster's direction. When Diego tries to attack her, the woman uses a chair as a shield to protect herself and manages to stop the zombie from getting close. Just then, Francis manages to open the door and attacks his brother. After knocking him down, the man hits the zombie's head repeatedly with his pistol until he manages to destroy it. After eliminating him, Francis is furious with Iris for letting Diego into the house and is about to eliminate her when he hears Lucas's voice. Terrified, the young boy shows the bite mark on his arm and Iris has to make the most difficult decision of her life. She knows that if nothing is done, Lucas will turn into a zombie, so she asks her husband to help her remove the young man's arm to prevent the infection from spreading to the rest of his body. But instead of helping her, Francis cowers in the corner of the wall. Iris then applies an anesthetic to her son and, after sterilizing the machete, she puts a piece of cloth in Lucas's mouth so that he can bite it while in pain. The woman then applies several blows to her son's arm and, even in deep pain, manages to do what needs to be done to save the young man's life. After removing Lucas's arm, Iris needs to disinfect the wound and bandage it while trying to reassure the young man. At this point, she asks her husband to help her take Lucas to hospital because he needs a blood transfusion. Immediately, Francis runs to the bridge to fetch the van and Iris stays with her son in her arms, trying to provide maximum comfort while he rests. When he finally finds the van, Francis comes across Josh and the young man is terrified to see his lunatic father covered in blood, so he points a gun in his direction and orders him not to come any closer. However, Francis doesn't listen to him and tries to approach the young man, who gets scared and ends up shooting the man. Seeing his father wounded on the ground, Josh regrets what he has done and rushes to try to help him, but Francis is hit in the chest and cannot survive. After the loss of his father, Josh decides to return to the farm and gets into the van to meet his mother and brother. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.